At 80, I learned that family can love you deeply and still hurt you in ways strangers never could. That truth took me almost a lifetime to accept. For many years, I believed love and pain could not live in the same relationship. I thought that if someone truly loved me, they would naturally protect my heart. They would speak gently. They would remember my sacrifices. They would notice when I was tired, lonely, or quietly breaking. But family love is not always that simple. Some people love you, but they do not know how to protect your heart. They may care about you and still ignore your boundaries. They may worry about you and still try to control your life. They may depend on you while forgetting that you also need support. They may say, "You know I love you," after speaking words that stay in your mind for years. At 80, I no longer deny the love, but I also no longer deny the wound. Both can be true. That was the hardest part for me. I wanted a clear answer. Either they loved me or they did not. Either I was grateful or I was hurt. Either I forgave or I stayed angry. Age taught me that the heart carries contradictions. You can love someone and need distance from them. You can forgive them and still remember what happened. You can understand their reasons without accepting their behavior. You can be grateful for the good they brought into your life while protecting yourself from the harm they continue to cause. Old age teaches you quietly. It removes the simple answers and leaves you with the truth. And the truth is that family can be both shelter and storm. The first lesson I learned was that love does not excuse disrespect. For years, I accepted words from family that I would never have accepted from anyone else. A stranger could not enter my home, raise their voice, insult my decisions, and expect me to serve them tea afterwards. But when family did it, I told myself to be patient. They are stressed. They did not mean it. That is just how they speak. They will calm down. I made excuses because I wanted to protect the relationship. But every excuse protected the other person from responsibility and left me carrying the pain. There was a family member who often spoke to me with impatience. If I asked a question twice, they became irritated. If I disagreed with them, they spoke as though age had made me foolish. If I asked for respect, they said I was being too sensitive. That phrase controlled me for years. Too sensitive. As though pain becomes imaginary when another person refuses to acknowledge it. I would leave those conversations doubting myself. Perhaps I had misunderstood. Perhaps I expected too much. Perhaps older people should be easier to please. Then one day I noticed something. This person did not speak that way to everyone. They were polite to strangers, patient with co-workers, careful around people whose approval mattered to them. Their harshness was not uncontrollable. It was reserved for the person they believed would always forgive them. That realization hurt, but it also gave me clarity. I said, "You may disagree with me, but you may not speak to me that way." They became defensive. They reminded me of everything they had done for me. They said family should not have to be so formal. But respect is not formality. Respect is what allows love to remain safe. If someone says they love you but repeatedly humiliates, dismisses, or belittles you, do not allow the word love to silence what their behavior is teaching you. Love may explain why you keep trying. It does not require you to keep accepting disrespect. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Family love without respect will eventually feel like emotional captivity. The second lesson was that family often hurts us through expectation, not only cruelty. Not every wound comes from harsh words. Some wounds come from being expected to carry too much for too long. The responsible person in a family is rarely asked whether they are tired. They are simply given another responsibility. For much of my life, I was the one people called. When someone had a problem, I listened. When money was short, I found a way to help. When there was tension between relatives, I tried to bring peace. When an event needed organizing, I handled it. People described me as strong, dependable, and generous. Those words sounded like compliments, but over time they became a job description I was never allowed to resign from. If I said I was tired, someone reminded me that I had always managed before. If I said no, they looked surprised. If I needed help, people assumed I would somehow solve that problem too. This is where many of us make the mistake. We become so proud of being needed that we do not notice when need has turned into entitlement. There is satisfaction in helping family. There is meaning in being dependable. But when everyone expects you to sacrifice and no one notices the cost, love becomes unbalanced. I remember a period when several family members needed support at the same time. One needed practical help, another needed money, another wanted hours of emotional attention. I kept saying yes. Then one evening I sat alone in my kitchen and realized no one had asked how I was. They were not cruel people. Some of them loved me sincerely, but they had become accustomed to my strength. And I had helped create that pattern by hiding my limits. I began saying, "I cannot do all of this." Those words felt almost shameful. I expected anger. There was disappointment, but there was also adjustment. People found other solutions. Some responsibilities were shared. Others simply disappeared because they had never truly been mine. Love does not mean carrying every burden before others are asked to lift anything. A family is not supported by one person collapsing quietly beneath everyone else. The third lesson was painful because it involved guilt. Family knows your history. They know your old mistakes, your regrets, and the moments you wish you could change. That knowledge can create intimacy. It can also create power. I have made mistakes as a parent, partner, sibling, and relative. I have been impatient. I have failed to listen. I have allowed work, worry, or pride to make me emotionally absent. There are things I would do differently if time offered me another chance. For years, guilt made me easy to control. Whenever I set a boundary, someone could bring up the past. If I said I could not help financially, I was reminded of a time when I had failed them. If I asked to be spoken to respectfully, an old mistake was used to explain why I did not deserve respect now. If I needed distance, I was told I was abandoning the family again. I believed that because I had caused pain, I had no right to protect myself from pain. But the hardest lesson came later. Taking responsibility for the past does not require living in permanent punishment. You can apologize sincerely. You can listen to how your actions affected someone. You can repair what is still possible. But an apology is not a contract giving another person control over the rest of your life. I learned to say, "I regret what happened, and I am willing to discuss it honestly, but it does not give you permission to mistreat me now." That sentence was difficult. Part of me feared it sounded cold. But regret and dignity must be allowed to exist together. A person can be sorry and still have boundaries. A person can have failed in the past and still deserve respect in the present. Do not allow guilt to make every current decision a payment on an emotional debt with no final amount. Regret should guide your behavior. It should not become a chain around your neck. The fourth lesson was that some family members love the role you play more than the person you are. That truth is painful because roles can look like relationships. Perhaps you are the peacemaker, the one who lends money, the one who hosts gatherings, the one who forgives first, the one who listens without speaking about your own problems. As long as you continue playing that role, everyone says the family is close. But when you change, people may accuse you of becoming selfish, distant, or difficult. I did not understand this until I was much older. I thought people loved me for who I was. Some did. Others loved the comfort I provided. I noticed this when I stopped solving every family disagreement. For years, when two relatives argued, each would call me. I listened to both sides. I carried messages between them. I tried to calm everyone down. The conflict became mine, even though I had not created it. Eventually, I said, "You need to speak directly to each other. I will not be placed in the middle." Both were unhappy with me. For a while, I felt guilty. Then I realized their anger was not proof that I had done something wrong. They had lost access to a service I had provided. The family had not become less loving because I stopped being the messenger. It had simply become less convenient for people who avoided responsibility. When you stop performing an old role, you discover who is interested in knowing the real you. The real you may be tired. The real you may have needs. The real you may not want to solve every problem. The real you may require privacy, rest, and respect. A healthy family relationship makes room for that person too. Do not confuse being useful with being known. The fifth lesson was that forgiveness does not always restore closeness. I used to believe that if I truly forgave someone, everything had to return to normal. We had to speak as often as before. I had to invite them back into my home. I had to trust them with private information. If I kept distance, I feared it meant I was bitter. So I reopened doors before trust had returned. Someone would apologize, and I would immediately remove every boundary. Then the same pattern would begin again. The apology brought relief, but it did not bring change. Eventually, I understood that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. Forgiveness can mean releasing the desire to punish someone. It can mean refusing to let anger occupy your mind every day. It can mean wishing them no harm. But trust must be rebuilt through consistent behavior. A person who has shared your private information does not automatically regain access to your secrets because they said sorry. A person who repeatedly borrowed money without responsibility does not automatically regain access to your savings. A person who used every visit to criticize you does not automatically regain unlimited access to your home. You can forgive and still change the distance. I once told a family member, "I am not carrying anger towards you, but our relationship cannot continue exactly as it was." They said that meant I had not forgiven them. I disagreed. Forgiveness allowed me to stop fighting the past. Wisdom required me to learn from it. Not everyone who receives your forgiveness should receive the same level of closeness. Sometimes love survives only after distance creates safety. The sixth lesson was that family can hurt you by refusing to see that you have changed. People who knew you when you were younger often keep speaking to an old version of you. They remember your failures, habits, and roles. They may not notice how much reflection, grief, and experience have changed you. You may have become calmer, but they still expect anger. You may have become more independent, but they still treat you as weak. You may have learned to set boundaries, but they call it selfishness, because the old version of you never said no. Families are built on long memories. That can be comforting. It can also become a prison. There were people who brought up mistakes I had made decades earlier, as though nothing had happened since. No matter what I changed, they returned me to the same old identity. I tried explaining myself. I listed the ways I had grown. I wanted them to update the picture they held of me. But the older I get, the less I explain myself to people who only hear what they want. Growth does not require a family vote. You do not need everyone to recognize the new version of you before you are allowed to live as that person. Sometimes your change will disturb the family because the old pattern depended on you remaining exactly the same. If you once accepted disrespect and now you do not, people may say you have become proud. If you once gave without limit and now you are careful, they may say money has changed you. If you once stayed silent and now you speak honestly, they may say you are creating conflict. Let them be uncomfortable. Growth often feels like betrayal to people who benefited from your old wounds. The person you are becoming deserves protection, even from those who remember you differently. The seventh lesson was that love cannot survive endless unspoken pain. For many years I kept quiet to protect the family. I did not want conflict. I did not want children or relatives choosing sides. I did not want private matters becoming public conversations. So I swallowed disappointment. I told myself peace required silence. But silence can preserve the appearance of peace while resentment grows beneath it. I smiled at gatherings, then went home hurt. I answered calls, then replayed the conversation all night. I said, "It is fine," when it was not fine at all. Eventually, the pain began appearing in other ways. I became distant. I answered less warmly. Small comments irritated me because they touched wounds I had never discussed. The family noticed my behavior but did not understand its source. This is what unspoken pain does. It confuses everyone. Honesty does not guarantee that people will respond well. Some will become defensive. Some will deny what happened. Some will say you are remembering it incorrectly. But respectful truth gives a relationship a chance that silent resentment never can. I began speaking more clearly. When you say that, I feel dismissed. I want a relationship with you, but this pattern is hurting me. I am willing to listen, but I also need to be heard. I learned not to begin with a list of every failure from the past. I spoke about the pattern and the boundary. Then I watched what happened. A person who cares may not agree with everything you say, but they will usually show some concern for your pain. A person who only wants control will focus entirely on defending themselves. Their response becomes information. Sometimes honest conversation repairs the bond. Sometimes it reveals why distance is necessary. Both outcomes are clearer than pretending nothing is wrong. The final lesson was the deepest one. I learned that I could love my family without making them responsible for all my peace. This truth changed me. For years, my emotional life rose and fell according to family behavior. If they called, I felt valued. If they visited, I felt loved. If they forgot, I felt rejected. If they criticized me, I questioned my worth. I had given them too much control over my inner life. Family love matters deeply. There is no point pretending otherwise. The people closest to us can bring a kind of comfort no stranger can replace. But when we depend on family to fill every empty space, their ordinary failures become unbearable. No child can erase every loneliness of an aging parent. No sibling can heal every childhood wound. No relative can provide all the understanding we missed for decades. When we demand that family become everything, love turns into pressure. I had to build a life that did not collapse every time someone disappointed me. I began protecting small routines that belonged to me. Quiet mornings, a walk, a conversation with a friend, a meal prepared carefully, time outside, music that settled my thoughts, a room that felt peaceful. These things did not replace family. They reduced the power of family disappointment to destroy an entire day. A quiet life is not an empty life. When your whole emotional world is placed inside one family circle, every conflict feels like the end of belonging. But belonging can exist in more than one place. It can exist in friendship, in community, in faith, in the kindness of a neighbor, in the relationship you build with yourself after years of neglect. Peace grows when love is part of your life, not the only proof that your life matters. At 80, I no longer divide my family into good people and bad people. Life has made me more careful than that. Some have loved me well, some have loved me poorly. Some carried wounds they never learned to heal, then passed those wounds into the next generation. Some were kind in practical ways but emotionally distant. Some spoke warmly but disappeared when responsibility arrived. Some hurt me without understanding the depth of what they had done. Others understood and still refused to change. I also know that I have hurt people. Age does not give me innocence. There were times I believed providing was enough when someone needed tenderness. There were moments I used authority when I should have listened. There were apologies I delayed because pride felt safer than vulnerability. Recognizing my own failures helped me become compassionate, but compassion must include myself. I can understand why someone behaves as they do and still decide that the behavior cannot continue around me. I can acknowledge my mistakes without accepting blame for everything. I can forgive without pretending the wound never existed. I can love without remaining available for repeated harm. Peace requires that balance. Too much hardness turns the heart cold. Too much tolerance teaches people there is no cost to hurting you. Wisdom stands between them. It says, I love you, but this must change. It says, I forgive you, but trust will take time. It says, you are family, but my home and peace still require respect. It says, I understand your pain, but I will not become the place where you release it. Those sentences may sound simple. They took me decades to learn. Older generations were often taught to keep family matters inside the family and endure whatever came. We called it loyalty. Sometimes it was loyalty. Sometimes it was fear. Fear of shame. Fear of loneliness. Fear of what people would say if the family was not as close as it appeared. But a family image is not more valuable than a human heart. Do not protect the appearance of unity while one person is suffering in silence. Do not demand that the most patient person continue absorbing everyone's anger. Do not tell someone to let it go simply because honest change would be inconvenient. Peace is not achieved when one person stops complaining. Peace is achieved when respect becomes stronger than entitlement. At 80, I no longer expect perfect love. I do not give perfect love either. Families are made of imperfect people carrying different memories of the same years. One person remembers sacrifice. Another remembers absence. One person remembers discipline, another remembers fear. One person remembers doing their best, another remembers what that best failed to provide. These truths can exist together. Healing begins when we stop demanding that only one version be allowed. You do not have to agree with someone's entire memory to acknowledge their pain. And they do not have to agree with every decision you made to recognize that you also carried burdens they never saw. Understanding does not erase consequences, but it can soften the need to win. I no longer want to win family arguments. I want clarity. I want dignity. I want relationships where both people can speak without humiliation. And when that is not possible, I want enough courage to step back without hatred. Sometimes dignity means walking away without proving your pain. Not every person will understand your boundary. Some will call it rejection. Some will call it pride. Some will repeat a version of the story in which you are the difficult one. You cannot control that. You can only ask whether the boundary is honest, fair, and necessary. If it is, let it stand. You do not need everyone's approval to protect your peace. You do not need a dramatic confrontation. Distance can be gentle. A shorter conversation, fewer private details, a visit in a neutral place, a refusal to discuss money, a decision not to answer disrespect immediately, a pause before saying yes. Not every boundary needs to end a relationship. Sometimes it simply changes the shape of it. Some family members belong close. Some belong at a respectful distance. Some can be loved through occasional contact. And some may need to remain outside your daily life until their behavior changes. Blood explains the connection. It does not decide the level of access. At 80, I learned that family can love you and still hurt you. That truth no longer confuses me as much as it once did. Love is a feeling, respect is a practice, trust is a pattern, forgiveness is a choice, closeness is a privilege. A family may feel love and still fail at the other things. Your task is not to deny the love. Your task is to see the entire relationship clearly. Take in the kindness. Remember the good. Be honest about your own failures. But do not use love as a blindfold. Notice the patterns. Listen to the words. Watch how boundaries are treated. Pay attention to how you feel after the conversation ends. Do you feel known or diminished? Calm or confused? Loved or merely obligated? Your heart often understands the truth before your pride is ready to accept it. I still love my family. I still hope for healing where healing is possible. I still believe apologies matter and people can change. But I no longer sacrifice my peace to preserve closeness at any cost. The years I have left matter. My home matters. My dignity matters. The quiet inside my mind matters. And so does yours. Love your family, but do not disappear inside that love. Forgive when you can, but learn from what happened. Speak honestly, but do not waste your final years trying to convince people who refuse to listen. Offer another chance when behavior supports the apology. Create distance when the same wound keeps returning. And never believe that protecting yourself means you have stopped loving. Sometimes the most honest form of love is a boundary. Sometimes the most peaceful form of forgiveness is distance. Sometimes the family bond survives because you finally stop allowing it to destroy you. If you have learned that family can love you and still cause pain, share your age in the comments and tell me what that truth taught you. Did you choose forgiveness, distance, a stronger boundary, or some combination of all three?